I'm Diana Clark. I'm president of Intent Clinical, and today I am thrilled to be talking with Colleen Jackson, our resident expert on all things that have to do with neuropsychs and the cognition that changes as we age, and the family dynamics that transition as one member of the family becomes less than able to take care of other members of the family. So welcome, Colleen Jackson. I'm really thrilled to be talking with you.
Thank you so much, Diana. I'm delighted to be here.
We talk so much about getting ready financially for our senior years. We talk about our residences, what's going to be appropriate for where we live, but we often don't talk about the impact that our aging is going to have on our younger generations. And what I want to know is, when you first work with a family that seems to be encountering this transition from mom or dad to person who will be taken care of in the future or in the now, what are the things you think about?
It's such a great place to start, because I think that whenever we're talking about cognitive decline, particularly amongst older members of our families, it's really a family conversation. As a neuropsychologist, I often am meeting with individuals, but I am always thinking about the family system. And when I'm lucky enough to meet with spouses, adult children, other important people in that individual's life, usually during a feedback appointment, I consider myself very lucky, because that's where really important conversations start to happen.
I would imagine, though, that the important conversations start long before you come in. So where would you, in your own family or with a friend sitting over lunch, what's the first thing you advise them to do?
So I am often talking about starting these conversations well in advance of actually meeting them. Often I'm encouraging friends, people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, to be having these conversations about their older loved ones and about themselves. Right. So the earlier that we can start having proactive conversations about how we want to age, what is most important to us, and how we would like our family members to show up in that process, I think the more that we can actually engage our aging family members in the process, which ultimately at the end of the day helps to preserve their agency, their autonomy, and their participation.
So when I think about this, it is so often, though, that it is in a moment of observation of a member of our family declining that we begin the conversation. Is that accurate?
You are absolutely right. So there's one thing to talk about the ideal circumstance where we are having these conversations early and often, and right. Far more frequently, we are finding ourselves in the moment where things are starting to change. Perhaps there's something more like a crisis at hand, perhaps not, but often it's okay, we need to have this conversation sooner rather than later. And in my opinion, that's okay. We can still really bring forth a lot of intention, both from individuals who are aging themselves and their loved ones, in terms of how to plan for the now and the moving forward.
That's great. I was thinking about, I am part of the sandwich generation. I am launching a young adult, and I have a mother who's 91 who is viciously and ferociously independent and lives an independent living. And yet what I'm noticing is a real memory decline, not in her ADHD, not in her adult activities, not in leaving stoves on or anything dangerous, but in her memory of long ago. It is almost gone now. And she seems happier for it. And I'm surprised by that. Is that uncommon?
You know, it's so interesting. As our loved ones age, we can see so many different paths that they take. So for some individuals, there may actually be more retention of those memories from long ago and forgetting of recent conversations, recent stories, things along those lines. And for other family members, other loved ones, we may see quite the opposite. And in some ways, the shift that can come around emotionally from perhaps letting go or forgetting some of those events from long ago can actually help individuals be a little bit more in the moment. So what I mean to say by all of this, Diana, is there are so many paths that aging can take. I think really approaching each one as a unique path and being present for our loved ones as their experience unfolds is going to help all of us navigate the ups and downs of the aging process.
As somebody who works professionally assessing and looking at how are they doing, our organization does walk into the home and say, is this safe? Is it not safe? Let me assess. What are the things you're looking out for in those moments when you first walk in? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, this is a great question because this gets at the benefits of meeting individuals in their homes, which is something that, as someone who trained in traditional academic medical centers, that was very much not the case. We were seeing individuals in the office, which brings its own set of benefits and also downsides. But when we get to meet individuals in their homes, we are now privy to information that they may have not been able to tell us about, may have been reluctant to tell us about, and or we may not have simply asked because we didn't know.
Or had no awareness that
Had
was
no
anything
awareness of.
other than average. Right.
Yes. So, I find when I am meeting with individuals in their home, I am taking in all of their experience from safety perspectives, like how many stairs are there? Are there rugs or other potential tripping hazards? Is the lighting adequate, or are there shadows or things that may be difficult for the individual to navigate if they're experiencing vision changes? All the way through to, there seem to be a lot of piles of paper here. I wonder whether bills are being paid on time. I see that there is a pillbox here, but it's not filled. I wonder who's responsible for managing this individual's medications.
Right.
And so having some of those external pieces of data, I'll say, can be incredibly valuable as we think about not only from a diagnostic standpoint, but more importantly, from a what sort of supports can we help to put in place for this individual.
So when you think of a robust squad for somebody who is coming up in years, what does that look like in your mind? What's the gold standard? Yeah.
Yes. Well, from on the medical side, I think having a primary care physician or internist who you trust and who knows you well is really important. That's also always often going to be one of the first people that may either identify early cognitive or functional changes, or whom an individual might feel a sense of security in sharing. Gosh, I'm having more difficulty remembering things or carrying out these kinds of tasks. So that's often sort of a first line person. Then oftentimes a neurologist may be brought in for further assessment, and often care management moving forward. So that's kind of on the medical side. And then sometimes I'll say a neuropsychologist may come in to add another piece of the puzzle, some additional information that's often helpful for recommendations and treatment planning. But almost more important than the medical side, we want to be thinking about the individual's quality of life. And that's where making sure that there are people who can support them in living their lives as safely and autonomously as they can for as long as they can becomes really important. And so that can look different for different individuals. It may be family members, it may be care managers, it may be people from a religious or spiritual community. But I think really making sure that individuals, as they age, have others around them who can support them in social activities, getting around, and continuing to live as fully as they possibly can. We know that this is good for the brain, it's good for the body. I would say it's good for the soul.
I remember a quote, and I'm going to butcher it now, but Jimmy Carter said something that our children are inclined to turn us into well-meaning vegetables just by the amount they'll do for us, and that it is important that we continue to do for ourselves. Right.
I agree. And that's the balance. That's the tension. And I think that's where in some families there can be some challenge because of well-meaning adult children or other family members. there may be sort of a stepping into and taking over certain roles before that's needed. And I think having those conversations, having those negotiations, and really recognizing the importance of autonomy and of doing as part of one's health, right? We
As a
know that
health element.
as a
Yeah.
health element, I think we see changes in mood, we see changes in functioning when individuals no longer feel like they have a purpose or meaning in their lives. And so that is a huge piece as they continue to age.
I can see that. And then what I wonder is many parents of our culture, and I'm talking about the culture of the United States, live to say, I don't want to be a burden to my children
Yeah.
because we don't have as much intergenerational caretaking that goes on in other cultures.
Yeah.
So when does that shift? Because it does have to shift at some point. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you have the conversations when you hear, I don't want to be a burden? Because I think that's the opening. It's not a burden and you're going to need our help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Diana. And I hate to be a broken record here, but this is where those early conversations, those proactive conversations become so important because ideally we're having those conversations before there's any actual need to change a loved one's living circumstances or to necessarily provide more support in order to better understand what they are hoping for and to put as much in place as possible. So we will often see clients who would like to age at home. That is their goal, is to stay in their home for as long as possible. And when we know that early, when the family has known that for years, if not longer, then we can start putting things into place well in advance and before we're at a crisis point. Um, and so I think that's one of the pieces. The other piece touches on what you were saying, though, in terms of at some point, changes will likely need to be made, whether that's changes in support level, whether that's changes in someone's living arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there, I often like to encourage families and adult children in particular to approach these conversations from a place of care, from a place of inquiry, and from a place of recognizing that this is not a problem to solve. This is an experience to navigate together with their parent. And so it's likely going to be many conversations and many iterations of that conversation that will take place over time as everyone is figuring out this evolving process.
It sounds really like parenting in reverse as you describe it. You know, parenting is a series of conversations with our kids and growth points and changes and reacclimating as they get to a new phase. And it sounds very much like that, only in the converse.
I think that's a beautiful way to think about it. And I think when we can sort of frame it that way, I think that can be very helpful for everyone. And it's not to change the dynamic that exists between a parent and their adult child, but I think it really is helpful, especially for adult children, to recognize what is unfolding here, and that this again isn't sort of a flashpoint, but this is a new stage of life, and really helping them conceptualize how they can be sort of most active with their loved one.
How do you tease out, and I know that this may be a personal experience, but I don't think it's uncommon, the grief that many seniors, their friends are dying, their mates are dying, their parents have died, their siblings might be passing. And how do you differentiate between grief and the cognitive fog that can be part of grief and actual organic cognitive decline? I'm really curious about that because I wonder.
Yes, it's a great question. And it's one that, as neuropsychologists, we wrestle with, whether it's grief related to the loss of loved ones or other sources of depression. We know that depression can often mimic some of the cognitive presentations associated with other forms of cognitive decline or neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's disease. In fact, there's a term for it. It's called pseudo dementia. right? It looks like dementia, but it's not actually dementia.
Dementia.
And so what we're often looking for are clinical history. So sort of what is the timeline and the progression of an individual's cognitive changes, whether it's memory impairments, some cognitive slowing, other things that they're noticing in terms of their day-to-day functioning. When did that start? How has it progressed over time? And does it correlate with their mood? We also think about patterns in terms of cognitive performance. So for something like Alzheimer's disease, for example, we're really expecting to see memory impairment. So individuals may have difficulty learning new information, and then after a short period of time, they're going to have difficulty recalling that information. It's almost as if the information is no longer accessible to them.
Available. Mm-hmm.
They may also start to experience language changes, difficulty coming up with the words that they want to use, or perhaps what we call some visual spatial or navigation changes. So they're getting lost in familiar places. So when we start to hear about patterns of change that are co-occurring like that, that's where we start to think, okay, this is something beyond what I would expect for someone who's experiencing mood-related cognitive changes. So that's a way that we can look to tease those things apart.
Right. So Colleen, what am I not asking?
That's a great question.
What am I missing?
You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Diana, I think that, one thing that can be very challenging for many of the families that we work with is coming to sort of think about and then have conversations around when their loved one is no longer able to carry out some of the important tasks that they have historically been involved in. That might look like running a family business. That might look like managing complex household affairs, complex financial affairs. And this can often be really difficult for family members, particularly when the loved one who is experiencing some of these cognitive changes has really held down the fort, has really been sort of the bedrock of the family for so long. And, as I have these conversations with family members, again, we're often talking about how do we approach these conversations from a place of care and curiosity? How do we sort of stay in the moment and recognize that we're planting seeds? We're likely not uprooting decades of family history, but we're looking to start opening doors to conversations. And I think that in and of itself can be so powerful for family members to relieve some of the pressure they feel on themselves to, again, solve this problem, and instead thinking about how they want to have this conversation.
Love that. Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate you taking the time today and talking with me.
Thank you, Diana.